for the question and answer period. That being said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can either put them in the chat, but I will be sharing my screen, so it's a little hard to see the chat, or you could go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask the question, or you could wait till the end of the presentation and ask questions then. Okay, so this is a grant writing workshop for the Omaha Neighborhood Grant Program put on by the Omaha Community Foundation. We'll be going over specifically the Omaha Neighborhood Grant Program and the different project goals that the grant has, as well as different sorts of areas that the application is looking for. However, we'll also be talking about grant writing tips in general. So I think it should be helpful, and we can also talk about some other grant opportunities that Omaha Community Foundation offers as well. So One Omaha, where I'm the engagement manager, empowers people where they live with education, training, and engagement to develop thriving neighborhoods. And we provide technical assistance and promotion for the Omaha Neighborhood Grant Program. So the types of support that we can provide is if your group needs help with developing ideas, we can help with visioning sessions where we can do like consensus building workshops, and come to agreement on a goal that the group has. We can also provide project development support. So if the group maybe has like a couple of different ideas, but just wants some help figuring out kind of like putting it on a timeline, figuring out what that budget would be like, or just developing that project and fleshing it out a little bit more. Like maybe you've identified an issue, but you haven't quite figured out exactly how you want to approach responding to that issue. We can help with that type of project development support. We also provide grant writing support in the form of these grant writing workshops, which we have one more in February, and we can provide one-on-one technical support. So while you're going through the grant application, if you have any questions or you want some feedback on some of the answers that you're working on the application, you can go ahead and reach out, and we can help out with that. Really, any questions you have about the application, you can reach out and we can provide assistance with that. And then we also help with successful implementation of the grant through providing fiscal sponsorship for organizations that don't have a bank account, as well as budget narrative assistance. So if you've developed your budget, but you're not exactly sure how to bring that out in a narrative form, we can help out with that. And we can also help you with tracking and budgeting in that, or tracking your budget in that way. So a little bit more about the Omaha Neighborhood Grant. This neighborhood grant is for up to $5,000. The average award is $2,500, but your group can ask for up to $5,000 for your project. The application is open from January 1st through March 1st. And this grant is for resident-led neighborhood level projects. So you really want to keep in mind that when you're approaching project ideas from this, for this grant, think of yourself in their capacity as a resident and how you're going to approach the issue or your project on a neighborhood level. So how are you bringing together people in a certain geographic area to create a stronger community in that geographic area? Projects have to be completed in 2025. So applications, like I said, are due March 1st. You'll submit your applications online, and I will do a follow-up email after this workshop. And in that follow-up email, I'll include a link to the application. So you'll submit those applications online. In about mid-June, you'll receive word of whether or not you've received the funding. And then you'll receive, after you find out whether or not you received the funding. If you did receive the funding, then you'll sign a grant award agreement. And after you sign that agreement, the funds will be dispersed electronically about a week later. So if you apply for this grant, you will be receiving that funding towards the end of June, possibly early July, depending on when you sign that grant agreement. And you'll have to complete that project or the phase of the project that is being funded through this grant by December 31st. That's when the grant report is due. So it's important to know. So eligibility for this grant, your neighborhood group must be located within the city limits of Omaha, and you have to be listed in the city of Omaha's neighborhood directory. In that email that I send as a follow-up, I'll also have a link to the neighborhood directory. If you have any questions as you're going through the application for the neighborhood directory, you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to walk through it with you or answer any questions over email. You just need to choose a name for your group. You have to have 3 engaged members that are willing to have their contact information listed, and you'll have to choose a geographic area that you're serving. There's 2 parts to the neighborhood directory. There's neighborhood associations and community groups. So if you're a neighborhood association, you can register under the neighborhood association. If you're a community group that's doing work on a wider city level, then you can register under community groups. So to be eligible for this grant and for another neighborhood grant, the mayor's grant, you do have to be listed in the neighborhood directory by March 1st. You're not required to have nonprofit status, a 501c3 status, but you do have to have a bank account under your group. Or if you don't have that, then you can use a fiscal sponsor. So One Omaha provides fiscal sponsorship. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the workshop. And you can't use a personal bank account to receive this funding. So if you need a fiscal sponsor, One Omaha can work with you for that. So the program goals are to develop leadership skills, increase group capacity, and create stronger neighborhoods. So developing leadership skills is the primary goal of this grant program. So you want to think about how your project will create leadership opportunities for members through consensus building, communications, project planning, fundraising, teamwork, and other sort of leadership skills. I think sometimes when we think, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, like leadership development, but sometimes when we think of leadership development, we think like, oh, we have to have like a president of the neighborhood association that, we're going to say that their leadership skills are being the president of the neighborhood association. And that's fine. And that is a leadership development opportunity, but there are a lot of things that you can think of as a leadership skill. Basically, anything that is putting someone in a capacity to put other people in a capacity to create change is going to be a leadership skill. And we'll get a little bit more into that later on. So thinking about increasing capacity, how is this project going to lay the groundwork for your group to do more and to do it more effectively? This could be through creating resources or increasing engagement or identifying collaborations. And then also, how is this project going to create stronger neighborhoods? How is it going to improve the quality of life in Omaha neighborhoods? How is it going to affect safety, beautification, the organization of neighborhood groups, or provide a social benefit or increased access to shared resources? These are areas that you really want to identify in your project before you start the application, because a lot of the questions in the application are going to ask how your project will achieve these goals. So just some project ideas. It could be arts and education. So projects that are creating opportunities for neighbors to learn new skills, or they're going to support local artists and small businesses. Events that create activities that create neighborhood pride and provide opportunities for neighbors to get to know each other and increase social bonds. And then how is your project going to develop resources that neighbors can use to support other projects moving forward? So just some examples of project ideas that have been funded in the past are murals, classes, concerts or plays, talent shows, poetry readings, movie nights, weekly markets, clothing swaps, block parties, celebration banquets, tool libraries, newsletters, community gardens, and little free pantries are all neighborhood projects that we've seen funded in the past. So that's a little bit more generally about the grant program. And now we're going to talk about grant writing specifically for this grant application, but also these tips are in general helpful for grant writing. So before you apply, you want to gather a core group of point people. So this is people that are going to help to develop the project and are going to be committed to implementing the project. So even if you plan to have 20 volunteers, you want to have a core group of 3 to 4 people, and one of them who's, willing to coordinate all of those volunteers. And then you need to be ready to receive funding. So being ready to receive funding means that you either have a bank account in your organization's name or you've secured fiscal sponsorship. You're going to want to familiarize yourself with the grant and important themes. So this means going to the website for the grant, reading through past projects that have been funded, familiarizing yourself with project goals or with grant goals and important themes, much like we just did here in this workshop. And so you just want to make sure that not only is your group eligible, but that your project fits within the goals of the grant funding. For these grants specifically, you want to make sure that you secure permission from city or property owners if necessary. So the grant application will ask if your project is taking place on public or private property, if you have received, if you've received the permission necessary. And sometimes they will also ask for you to have a letter that, that demonstrates that you've received permission from the city. So if you need to seek permission from either the City of Omaha Planning Department, Public Works, or the Parks Department, you can always reach out to me and I would be happy to connect you with the correct people at the city so that you could receive that permission. And then I think it's really important to create a shared folder for the process. I always like to go to the application and copy and paste all of the application questions into a shared document. And then in that shared document, I write up my draft proposals, my timelines, and my budgets. So this is kind of important for a couple of reasons. One reason is, especially if you're doing your grant application at kind of the last minute, turns out that that's when a lot of people are also submitting their applications, and I have seen websites crash. But if you have your entire grant application already saved in a Google Doc or somewhere else, it's no big deal. You can just copy and paste and continue on with your grant. So it's really important to have all of that information somewhere else besides the online application. And then additionally, having your budget somewhere outside of the application where you can track it and share that with like other folks is also really important for like transparency purposes, but also just for you being able to have somewhere that you can easily access that as you're getting ready to implement your project. Sometimes, when you submit a grant application, they will send you a document, the documentation of the grant application, and sometimes they won't. But even if they send you the, documentation of the application, it's a little bit harder to access than if you have it in a shared draft where you can just access it anytime. Additionally, sometimes when you're writing grant applications, like if you just get in the zone and you're killing it, it's really great when you're applying for future grants to be able to go back and look at what you wrote in past grants. Because like if you're really killing it while you're writing this grant at one point, and then 3 months down the line, you're having trouble starting another grant, being able to go back and reference when you did a really good job explaining something can really help to get the juices flowing in the future. Okay, so developing a project. One of the first things that you need to do is decide on what your project's going to be. One of the things that they really look for in grant applications across the board is clarity and the fact that you seem ready, and that it's not only that you understand your project, but that you understand the steps that it will take to accomplish your project. So being clear on what that project is very important. Like I said before, One Omaha can assist by facilitating a visioning workshop to decide on a project, or facilitating a project development workshop to get everybody on the same page and really flesh out that project with a timeline and a budget. You're also going to want to take stock of your capacity. You just want to apply for something that you can actually accomplish within the timeline of the grant project. So like we said, for this grant application, you're going to need to be able to accomplish your project between June and December. So what can you accomplish between June and December? And it's okay to break your project down into smaller phases. So, you know, the example here is like, if you want to start a weekly market, maybe you don't want to apply to start a weekly market this year. You want to apply to just try a market out once a month, or just a craft market, to, you know, get a taste for all of the different things that are involved with putting on that market. Or maybe, you know, you have the goal of putting on weekly classes. But you want to start with just once a month classes to see who's showing up, get feedback from the people that show up, you know, hear about like, are you, you know, giving them the information that they want, or do they want different information, or do they like the speakers, that sort of thing. So just thinking about what you can accomplish in this time, and also how far down the line you already are with your project. Are you ready to do the thing that you want to accomplish in the long term? Or, you know, do you want to break it down into smaller steps for now? And then just, is there a question?
Spam.
Oh,
Link was
Connie,
in spam.
Connie, could you go ahead and mute yourself?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. And then you always want to have a backup plan. So think about, you know, if you really want to do this project, how are you going to do the project without the grant? And how is this grant going to allow you to do that project even better? That's important because A, you might not receive funding, or you might not receive full funding. And if you've really gotten all these people on board with the project, you don't want to break momentum. You want to keep going. So, you know, if it's like you're going to have a party and somebody would, you know, you could find a place where you didn't have to pay rent, or somebody would offer you to use the space without paying rent if you didn't get the grant. But if you got the grant, you could support a small business by renting the space. That's something to think about. It's like, how will this project be able to happen without the grant funding? But then if the grant funding comes through, you can do all these other things that would make the project even better or more impactful. So having backup plan, because you might not receive funding, or you might not receive full funding. But then also sometimes grant applications are going to ask, how would you accomplish this without, you know, like, would you be able to accomplish this without funding? Because for some reason, funders want to know that you could do it without them. So you're always going to want to be able to show, I suppose, just how passionate you are and how you're the type of person that will make it happen no matter what. And that's why every dollar that they give you is going to go further than if they were to give that dollar to someone else. Okay, so developing your project specifically for this grant, but for any grant, you'll want to look through the project goals and then really think through how your project aligns with each of the funding goals. In this case, right now, we're going to do this for the Omaha Neighborhood Grant. So like we said, one of the main goals of this grant is to develop leadership skills. So you want to think through how your project will develop leadership skills within your organization. So thinking, what sort of organizational and communication skills are going to be necessary for this project? Is somebody going to be running a social media account for this? Is somebody else going to be a project coordinator that other people are going to check in with? Is somebody going to need to be running monthly meetings or volunteer meetings to prepare for this project? All of those are leadership skills that you will be developing, or that someone within your organization will be developing through the implementation of this project. Also, grant writing is a leadership skill. So another way to think about leadership skills within your project is thinking about how folks with more experience can be paired up with folks with less experience. So the folks with more experience will be providing something like mentorship to the folks with less experience. So providing mentorship is a leadership skill. And then the folks with less experience will be learning new tasks or learning new skills. And so that's also leadership development. Thinking about the different opportunities to get involved that will be created through this project. If you think about, you know, when you're in high school or college, sometimes you need those service hours and you're just looking for different places where you can be of service. The reason that they make folks do those service hours is because it develops these leadership skills. So thinking within your project, how are you creating opportunities to get involved? If you're putting on a block party, you can create opportunities for folks to come help set up, or folks to maybe help canvass the neighborhood. So outreach to others, that's a leadership skill, but then offering folks opportunities to get involved. You're offering leadership development to the folks getting involved, as well as you creating that opportunity is also a leadership skill. And then thinking through, like, how will this funding help to create more leadership opportunities than if you didn't have the funding? And that's really important. So, through having this funding, we'll be able to create more volunteer opportunities for others and volunteer coordination opportunities. Whereas if we didn't have the funding, we wouldn't be able to create as many of those opportunities because we wouldn't be able to put on as many events or something like that. Any questions about this point on leadership skills? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, and so then thinking about capacity building, that is another thing that the grant committee is really going to want to see, is that this project is going to help build the capacity of your organization. So some things that you can do to build capacity is you can be doing volunteer outreach, and that's really good. But you also want to think about how this project is going to build your capacity by, like I said, engaging more people, having more people be part of the group. And then we just talked a lot about leadership roles, but as people in your organization develop their leadership skills, you're also increasing the capacity of your organization, right? Because now you have all these people that have more leadership skills than they had before the project. So also, as you're thinking about capacity building, one of the things that you might be doing as you're developing your project is going through and identifying different resources that are available to the group and different skill sets that are available in the group. Just through identifying these resources and skills, you're increasing the capacity of your group because you're making everybody aware, whereas before, folks might not have been aware of what the group had to leverage in the first place. And then also developing a project that builds on those resources and skills is a good way to build capacity within the group. And then think about, like, through this project, will you be sharing and acquiring new skills? Like we said in the leadership development aspect, if you're sharing and acquiring new skills, not only are you developing leadership skills, but in this case, the more people you have with more skills, the greater capacity your organization will have. And then think about if you're creating, if your project is going to be like a pocket park or a community garden, you're creating a resource that can be used in the future. So if you're creating a new meeting place, now your organization has increased capacity because your organization has a place to meet on a regular basis. And then, if you're doing something like a tool library or a newsletter or setting up a new website, that's a resource that will also aid in future efforts because you can use that resource in the future for improved communications, or, just being able to accomplish more, like if you had a tool library. Any questions about capacity building? Okay, and then thinking through developing your project and COVID-19 safety, you want to make sure that as many people can access your project as possible. So taking into mind that there are folks that maybe would feel more comfortable participating in projects if they know that it's COVID safe. So thinking about how you can use funding, how you could use this funding to help accomplish that. You could use this funding to purchase PPE. You could use this funding to help you organize outdoor or digital activities or to get a Zoom account. You can think about if you're setting up, things inside or outside, maybe spacing them out. This is a great place for a lot of collaboration. There's a group called Clean Air Nebraska that has a tool library for COVID safety. So they have air filters, masks, and if you're looking for ways to work COVID safety or in general, just being mindful of disease safety in general, you can reach out to Clean Air Nebraska. I'd be happy to share their contact with you. And then other things that I think about when developing your project in response to COVID-19 is think about those things that felt lacking when the pandemic first hit, whether it was like connections with your neighbors or just the ability for folks to accomplish certain goals and, have those things that felt lacking when the pandemic first hit been addressed yet? And if they haven't been addressed, it's still a good time to address that. And then always want to have a backup plan. That can be for weather or for a bunch of people getting sick and not being able to accomplish the goal on the original timeline. Any questions about developing your project with COVID-19 in mind? All
Myself.
right. Okay.
Will I have access to these points that you have? Can we print this for
Yes.
future
So
reference again? Okay.
yeah, I will send a follow-up email, and in the follow-up email, we'll have links to the application, links to the neighborhood directory, a copy of all these slides, and then also a recording of the workshop.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So then a couple other things that you want to think about before you start your application is, what is your vision? How did you select this project? What is the issue that it's addressing? What is the need for this project? Thinking about with this project, what you help to accomplish in the short term, in the 6 months that you'll be doing the project, and how you hope that this project will set you up for long-term success as well. And then just listing out what are the benefits, what are the different social benefits of the project. And then you're going to want to create a timeline. So thinking of a month-by-month schedule for your project. So just thinking through, like in May, we'll go out and buy the supplies. In June, we'll organize the final details of the event. In July, we'll hold the event. They're going to want to see a timeline, and it's also going to be really helpful for you to have that timeline, because once the funding comes in, you already have a map of how to move forward. And so your funding hits your bank account and you're like, all right, let's go buy supplies. We know that we have to do that in early May. So timelines are great for successful implementation of the project and also successful grant application completion. And then this application will ask about ongoing maintenance. So if you're developing, a website or a pocket park or something like that, like who's going to continue to take care of this? Or if you're developing like a series of classes, like how will this continue to exist after the funding, after this funding has run out? And then how do you plan to continue to fund the project? So thinking about that too, with this grant application, if you wanted to do like a block party, you could also, sell cookies at the block party to help raise funds for future block parties. Okay, so tips for creating a budget. Budgets are really important in grant applications because folks want to see how you plan to spend their money. So one of the things that's really important is when you're getting that group of core organizers together before you start the grant application, you'll want one person to take on the role of budget coordinator. This is a really, really important role because this person is going to be in charge of making sure all the receipts are in one place, making sure that what is purchased aligns with what was in the original budget, and also being able to, in the grant report, say why things might not align perfectly with the budget. And that's okay. If you say that you're going to spend $200 on, I don't know, tablecloths, that's not the greatest example in the world, but say you're going to spend $200 on tablecloths, but, as you're organizing the project, someone says like, hey, I actually have all these old tablecloths that I just want to donate. Then all you need to do in your grant report is say, we ended up getting $200 worth of tablecloths donated. So instead, we've decided to use this tablecloth to support a local business and buy like fresh juice for the event. So you can have some changes to your budget, but it's good to try to stick to your budget as much as possible. So budget coordinator, really important role. And it's also a role that someone that might not be able to actually like attend events could take on. So, if you've got folks that want to be involved, but they can't necessarily like make the timing of some of the events, or, for whatever reason, it doesn't work with their schedules. One way that they can support is by being the budget coordinator. and then they're still a super integral part of the group. So to make a budget, you want to develop your project and then make a list of everything that you will need to accomplish your project. And then I like to go and do some online research to see how much those things cost. So, you know, if I say that I need 5 shovels, I'm not just guessing that shovels are $15 because they were $15 10 years ago, but now shovels are more like $30. So I'm gonna do some online research to get realistic estimates for my budget. And then I'm gonna round up. So if I see that a shovel is $29.60, I'm gonna say that a shovel is like $30 or $31 because maybe they're on sale. Maybe I'm not gonna actually make it to that exact same Menards. So I'm just gonna know that they're about $30 and I'm gonna round up to make sure that I have enough money to purchase those shovels. And then when you're writing your budget, you don't need to be so detailed. So for example, you don't need to say shovel 1, $32, shovel 2, $32. You can say tools, $100, or, you know, tools, $300, because the tools include shovels, rakes, and hoes. But you know that you've done that research so that you know that buying 3 shovels, 3 rakes, and 3 hoes will come out to $200. But you also don't want to be too vague, like you don't just want to say project supplies, $5,000. So keeping things to general categories and having accurate budget estimations is important. So I like to make my budget in a spreadsheet that is separate. I have templates that are available if you want to use them. And in that spreadsheet, that's where I track and keep track of all my receipts and all of the spending that happens. It's really, really important to keep track of everything in a spreadsheet. You know, almost every grant requires a grant report. And, you know, if you can't report on how you use that money, you may have to return that money. So you really want to keep track of everything. So that's why I'm saying having a designated place for physical receipts and a designated email for online receipts. So if you're actually going through making the purchases, you know, as soon as you're purchasing those shovels from menards.com, you get that receipt and you're sending it to the designated email, whether that be the organization email or the budget coordinator's personal email. You're immediately sending those receipts. I would recommend having the designated email be a shared email account because especially with neighborhood organizing, you never know when sometimes people do just need to drop out. And so making it so that all of that information, so that their role can be picked up really easily is really important. So if you have physical receipt, or if you have these online receipts going to a personal email, that could make it hard if someone like got sick or had to, you know, attend to their family. Whereas if it was going to the organizational email, somebody else could just step in and take on that role. I also recommend that when you buy something in person and you have a physical receipt, that you immediately take a picture of that receipt before you leave the store. You take a picture of that receipt and you send it to the designated email. You do it right away, and that way you don't have to worry about losing that receipt. I would really recommend that. I put it on here a few times. Losing a receipt is pretty much the worst thing that could happen. So take that picture and send it immediately. Okay, and then last little tip here is about matching funds. Some grants ask for matching funds, some don't. This grant does ask for matching funds. So ways that you can provide matching funds. So sometimes folks will say like it's a 50% matching fund, which means that if you're asking for $5,000, you need to come up with an additional $2,500. And sometimes it'll be 100% matching fund. So if you're asking for $5,000, you need to come up with a $5,000 matching fund. So this grant does ask for matching funds, and you can do that in a few different ways. You can do it through grant funds that you raise from other grants. You can do it through funds that you raise through a fundraiser, or you can do it through in-kind donations. In this grant application, they will tell you that you can count volunteer hours at, I believe it's $26. So then you would just calculate, you know, an estimate of all the volunteer hours that it will take to put on the event. So if it's going to take 100 volunteer hours, so you'd say 100 times 26, that's $2,600 of in-kind donations through volunteer hours that we have as matching funds. Other things that can be matching funds is if a local business is going to provide food that, you could just ask them like, what's the value of this? Okay, it's $500. That's $500 more of in-kind donations that we have towards matching funds. And then if somebody say is going to provide the space for free, you would say, what is the space rental fee normally? Okay, that's going to be provided for free. So that is another $250 worth of in-kind donation matching funds. Anytime that you're putting on a community event, it takes a lot of time and energy. So you should be able to come up with these matching funds through volunteer hours or any other in-kind donations. But you can always also list other grants that you're applying for or any fundraisers that you plan to have. Any questions about the budget stuff right now? Okay. All right, so grant writing, documenting, and reporting. So this grant will require a report. It's not required to be in by the end of 2023, but rather by the end of 2025. So you want to make sure that you're only asking for aspects of the project that can be completed by December 31st, 2025, which is when the grant report is due. And you want to be ready to submit a report at the end of the year. So your support, they're just going to want to know, your report is, they're just going to want to know, how did you use the funds? Were you successful? Did you run into any issues or anything that was unexpected? Grant reports generally, and this grant report specifically, it's not a gotcha. It's that a lot of times they need to be able to show to donors that this is a worthwhile fund. So they're going to want to see how this money is being used and how it's being impactful so that they can raise more money in the future to continue this type of fund. So it's not a gotcha. You don't have to be really nervous about it. Rather, you can kind of have fun with it and talk about like how you were successful, what cool things happened. And if you ran into any difficulties, just be honest about it, because you're showing that even though there were difficulties, you were still able to pivot and persevere. So this reporting process is a pretty easy reporting process. As long as you have your receipts, it shouldn't take you more than about an hour. So this is an example of like budget tracking. You can see here that it's for the mayor's grant, so I was like, okay, these is what I'm asking for the mayor's grant. It's for the project of seed processing days. Here are the specific line items. I've got bins for storage. I'm estimating that it will cost $300. The status is that it's already been purchased. And the real cost was that it actually came out to $300. And then I have the, picture of the uploaded receipt linked right there so that if anybody ever asks to see the receipts, I can share this document with them and they can go ahead and see what I was talking about. Now you can see here for the smaller bins, I thought it was going to be $175. It turned out to be $164. So there's $9 left over. So I'm going to reallocate that $9 to something else. Perhaps these jars down here on the fourth line where I thought it would only be $200, but it was actually $207. And I can just tell them some things were a little more expensive than we thought, and some things were a little less expensive than we thought. So we reallocated some funds. And then you can see I have here highlighted in red. This was an ask for the mayor's grant. The mayor's grant does not cover knives. So I have it highlighted in red because that did not get covered by even though we asked for it, we didn't receive the funding for it. So this is a really simple budget template that helps to keep track of the status. Have we finished implementing our project? How much we thought it would cost, how much it actually cost, and a link to the receipt. Another thing to think about with this is, having the estimated costs and the real costs can help you also estimate costs in the future to see like, oh, I underestimated that, or the price of these things really does change rapidly. or I'm pretty on it with these sorts of cost estimations. Okay, so real quick about fiscal sponsorship. If you don't have an organizational bank account, you will need to have a fiscal sponsor to receive funding for this grant. If you would like to use One Omaha as a fiscal sponsor, you can attend our fiscal sponsorship workshop on February 18th, where we will walk through the process for requesting and receiving fiscal sponsorship. You'll fill out a fiscal sponsorship request form before February 26th to make sure that it's all in place by the March 1st deadline for this grant. And you can reach out to me with any questions that you have along the way while you are implementing and finishing your grant. But if you're interested in fiscal sponsorship, the workshop is going to be February 18th. Additionally, One Omaha can provide fiscal sponsorship for other grants as well. So for the Omaha Neighborhood Grant, we don't charge a fiscal sponsorship fee. For other grants outside of the Omaha Neighborhood Grant, we charge a 5% fiscal sponsorship fee. And we'll cover all of those details in the fiscal sponsorship workshop, which I'll include a link to register in the email that I follow up with. Okay, last point is you can do it, and it should be really fun. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll also stop recording.